Greetings and welcome to Nerd of the Word. My name is Ian and I will be your host for this Bible study. Thank you all so much for those of you that have already checked out the first episode. And if you haven't already, definitely make sure you do that. Thank you for everyone that participated in the comment section, sharing your thoughts, your interpretations, and providing more food for thought for others to soak it in and come to a deeper understanding of the Word of God. So in this episode, we're going to be going over chapter 2 in Genesis. So let's just go ahead and let's read the word, and then we will go back and we will break it down piece by piece. Thus the heavens and the earth were finished, and all the host of them. And on the seventh day, Elohim ended his work which he had made. And he rested on the seventh day from all his work which he had made. And Elohim blessed the seventh day and sanctified it, because that in it he had rested from all his work which Elohim created and made. These are the generations of the heavens and of the earth when they were created, and in the day that Yahuwah Elohim made the earth and the heavens, and every plant of the field before it was in the earth, and every herb of the field before it grew. For Yahuwah Elohim had not caused it to rain upon the earth, and there was not a man to till the ground. But there went up a mist from the earth, and watered the whole face of the ground. And Yahuwah Elohim formed the man of the dust of the ground, and breathed into his nostrils the breath of life, and the man became a living soul. And Yahuwah Elohim planted a garden eastward in Eden, and there he put the man whom he had formed. And out of the ground made Yahuwah Elohim to grow every tree that is pleasant to the sight and good for food. The tree of life was also in the midst of the garden, and the tree of knowledge of good and evil. And a river went out of Eden to water the garden, and from thence it was parted and became into four heads. The name of the first is Pishon. That is it which compasses the whole land of Kavala, where there is gold, and the gold of that land is good. There is bdellium and the onyx stone. And the name of the second river is Gishon. The same is it that compasses the whole land of Cush. The name of the third river is Kiddekel. That is it which goes toward the east of Ashur. And the fourth river is Perath. And Yahuwah Elohim took the man and put him into the garden of Eden to dress it and to guard it. And Yahuwah Elohim commanded the man, saying, Of every tree of the garden you may freely eat, but of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil you shall not eat of it. For in the day that you eat thereof, you shall surely die. And Yahuwah Elohim said, It is not good that the man shall be alone. I will make him a helper meet for him. And out of the ground Yahuwah Elohim formed every beast of the field and every fowl of the air, and brought them to the man to see what he would call them. And whatsoever the man called every living creature, which was the name thereof. And the man gave names to all cattle, and to all the fowl of the air, and to every beast of the field. But for the man there was not found a help meet for him. And Yahuwah Elohim caused a deep sleep to fall upon the man, and he slept. And he took one of his ribs and closed up the flesh instead thereof. And the rib which Yahuwah Elohim had taken from man made a woman and brought her to the man. And the man said, This is now bone of my bones and flesh of my flesh. She shall be called woman, because she has taken out a man. Therefore shall a man leave his father and his mother, and shall cleave to his woman, and they shall be one flesh. And they were both naked, and the man and his woman, and were not ashamed. All right. So that concludes chapter 2. Let's go ahead and let's go back and let's break it down and let's see what the meaning of what we just read might be. So first thing I want to state is you may notice some differences between what we went over in chapter 1 and what we just read in chapter 2. And at first glance, when reading the book of Genesis, it could be easy to get a little confused and think that chapter 2 contradicts chapter 1. And unfortunately, this confusion has even been perpetuated into the idea that these are two separate accounts of creation. However, while that may be a valid interpretation, I lean more on the side that this is actually a complementary account of the creation story that we got a summary of in chapter 1. So chapter 1 started us off right at the beginning with a summarizing statement of what we were about to read, and then broke down a summary of each of the 6 days of creation. Then chapter 2 begins in a summarizing statement of what we just finished in chapter 1. So if these were really two separate creation accounts, why would chapter 2 start summarizing what we just read in chapter 1? That is one hint leading me to believe that these are actually just the same creation account being discussed more personally, and I will go into that in a minute. Okay. So, thus the heavens and the earth were finished, and all the host of them. And on the seventh day, Elohim ended his work which he had made, and he rested on the seventh day from all his work which he had made. And Elohim blessed the seventh day and sanctified it, because that in it he had rested from all his work which Elohim created and made. So again, we've start this chapter off summarizing what we already learned in chapter 1. We went over the first 6 days of creation. This is letting us know that we finished all of creation, and then Elohim sanctified the seventh day and rested in it. Now, what's interesting is this is the first day of the creation story that actually gets blessed by Elohim. Elohim blesses the seventh day and he sanctifies it, which is interesting because that did not happen at all during the days of the work. But when the work was completed and he rested, he blessed that day, almost kind of like giving us a blueprint of how we should work or how we should adhere to in our lives. And, you know, in the old covenant, the way it was done was we worked 6 days and then we rested on the seventh day. Now, later on, we had a seventh covenant that was made, and this was made by Yeshua Christ. When he died on the cross, the word became flesh, died for our sins, gave us salvation through the blood of the Lamb. And in that started our second covenant, our renewed covenant, the one in spirit. Now, what's interesting about this is the day of rest changed. It was on Saturday. You worked 6 days and then you rested on the seventh. And then in the new covenant, after we had a salvation through the blood after the fall, we are given a new covenant where we rest on the first day of the week. Right on Sunday, we rest on the first day. So we start in rest. We start in the completed works. And that really just goes to show us how much God loves us. God loves us so much that he wants us to rest in him before we work. Now, we haven't gotten there, but I wanted to go ahead and just kind of throw that out there because you can really see the whole story in each piece of the story of the Bible, which I really love how perfect and complete the word is. So not only did he bless and sanctify it, but he rested, which is pretty cool for Adam because his first day after he rested from the evening and woke up. So Adam and Eve were created on the sixth day. So they did some things on the sixth day, which we will go over. And well, Adam did. And then Eve was created. And then on the seventh day, what was the first thing God asked of them? Nothing. Rest. Rest in the presence of God. That was the first thing that Adam did after he was created and fell asleep on that first night on sixth day, and he started his seventh day. There was no work, No, his first day was sanctified and blessed in the presence of Elohim, and he was only asked to rest in the presence of God. Now that's just beautiful. And we also see that there is something about significant about the works of God being completed. After God completed his works in the sixth day, then he blessed the completion of the work, and we rest in the completion of his works. That is a pattern we will see throughout the Bible. So let's go ahead and let's continue to verse 4. These are the generations of the heavens and of the earth when they were created in the day that Yahuwah Elohim made the earth and the heavens. Now, this is interesting because this, leading up till now, the only name or word that we were given was Elohim. Now we have been given the covenant name by God. And I think this is also evidence to support the idea that chapter 2 is an account of the personal relationship that God has with man, his creation of man. So before we even get to, describing in more personal detail God's relationship with man on the day 6, we first are establishing a covenant name. So God has given us a personal name for Adam, for man to call upon. So this shows that there is a personal relationship between the creator and the creation, especially so with man. And we saw that in chapter 1, how Adam or man were created special almost. And we will see that pattern of just how special we are to God. So this is the first time that we are given the covenant name, Yahuwah Elohim. Now, I know in my book, the English translation of the Tetragrammaton that we were given for the name of God, the covenant name, is spelled out Yahuwah. I know many people like to pronounce it Yahweh or Yahweh or Jehovah or Yahuwah. So whatever you choose to pronounce it, just understand that when I say Yahuwah, I am speaking of the covenant name that our Elohim gave man. All right, continuing forward. And every plant of the field before it was in the earth, and every herb of the field before it grew, for Yahuwah Elohim had not caused it to rain upon the earth, and there was not a man to till the ground. So here we know we are talking about the third day of creation. Because remember, chapter 2 starts off summarizing, finishing up what we learned in chapter 1, and then breaks down into more personal detail, the personal relationship that God has with man. So here we get a little bit of an idea of on the third day. We get a little more information on the third day of creation. We understand that from the first episode of this Bible study when we went over chapter 1, one of the things that we learned was that in the third day of creation, when the plants were created, the plants were able to sustain themselves solely off the light of God. There was light and it was called day, but there wasn't a sun yet. The sun and the heavens and the lights in the sky, that didn't come until day 4. So in day 3, the trees, the herbs, the greenery, they were all able to sustain its life, sustain its existence off the light provided by our Elohim. There was no sun. So I want to point that out. And then we get a little more information about that. Had not caused it to rain upon the earth, and there was not a man to till the ground, but there went up a mist from the earth and watered the whole face of the earth. Now here we are starting to get more of the pattern that I started to notice from our first episode. If you remember from chapter 1, we had the Ruach of Elohim move upon the face of the waters. So the spirit of Elohim came upon the water, so it was above it. So almost like as if maybe there was a descent of spirit to the waters. And then there was life. And then we had that life was able to sustain itself off the light of God. And then there was no rain yet. The rain doesn't come until after the fall and then the eventual flood of Noah. That's when the rain comes from above down, which I also believe is significant. But before we get there, so as of right now in day 3, the plant life is able to sustain life off the water rising from the ground. The water isn't falling to sustain it. The water is rising. And if you remember, water is oftentimes very symbolic to spirit. So as of right now, the plants are able to sustain itself off of the spirit rising to the heavens and sustaining itself solely off the light provided to it by Elohim. So this is kind of giving us an idea of, God's creation and his perfect plan for us and how we can be sustained and live. So first we have the spirit descend upon the waters, and then he said, let there be light. And then on day 3, we have the waters rising up to the heavens. And then it isn't until later on where we get to the flood of Noah that the rain then falls again. Now you see this pattern of a descend, a rise, and then a descend again. Now, why did the descend of Noah happen? To cleanse the earth, to flood the earth, to cleanse it. So we are starting to see the properties of spirit and how God moves. We're starting to get an idea of the pattern of creation and how God moves and works in our lives. So let's go ahead and continue. And Yahuwah Elohim formed the man of the dust in the ground and breathed into his nostrils the breath of life, and the man became a living soul. Now, this is something beautiful and something to also take into context and understanding when reading this is you will notice throughout the Bible, the term dust gets mentioned a lot. Now, during the times when this was being spoken, it was oftentimes being used to describe a level of humility, right? So something I would like to point out is that God could have formed man out of anything, but God took something like dust. Dust has no value, really. I mean, he could have made us out of gold. He could have made us out of the sun. He could have made us out of anything. But no, he chose something that has no value. But then he made it precious by breathing his breath of life into man and making it a living soul. And here we get another idea of the power and the will and the creation of God and how God moves. God can take something of little to no value and make it precious beyond understanding. He can take nothing into something. And we saw that pattern in chapter 1, where the earth was desolate without ruin. It had no form. There was chaos. There was darkness. And it wasn't until the spirit of Elohim came upon the face of the waters that there was light. So we see this pattern of God can take from nothing, from chaos, and then we come to light, we come to order. So from chaos, we come into order. From darkness, we come into light. From nothing, we can come into something. Now, if God can take something as invaluable as dust and make it precious, like a living being, a living soul, what do you think God can do for you in your life? It's just, we're getting an idea of God's will and what God can do for us in his power. So let's go ahead, let's continue. And Yahuwah Elohim planted a garden eastward in Eden, and there he put the man whom he had formed. So first, I just want to go ahead and make sure that we understand we are now talking about day 6 of creation. And we're getting ready to come up to a part that gets misinterpreted, and we'll go over that in a second. But we are right now talking about the 6th day of creation. We know that because we just read chapter 1, and they explained what happened in each of the 6 days. Okay. So what's interesting here is that Adam could have been placed anywhere on earth. We already understand that all of the earth has been formed. But God doesn't put the first man just anywhere on earth. No. So first, God takes something of little to no value, like dust, and breathes his life into it and makes it living, makes it precious. So that shows the redemptive qualities of God. This is also showing right here in verse 8, this is showing us how precious we are to God. We are so valuable and precious to God that he didn't just place us on the earth. He just didn't place us anywhere in the middle of nowhere. No, God created a garden A whole entire garden just for man. A special place on earth. That's how valuable we are to God. Not just anywhere on earth, but a special garden. And not only that, but he plants it eastward. Okay, now think about the sun rising and sun setting. We're getting a little bit more symbolism here. But let's go ahead and move forward. And there he put the man whom he had formed. Okay. And out of the ground made Yahuwah Elohim to grow every tree that is pleasant to the sight and good for food. Now, before we continue on this verse, this right here can be confusing because if you read this all in one go, you'd be like, okay, but I thought this was already done in day 3. You're right. It was. It doesn't specify, nowhere in chapter 2 does it specify what day we're talking about. And it's also speaking in past tense. And also, so we know we're talking about the 6th day. We know we're talking about God putting Adam in the garden, but it's also like, oh, and by the way, Elohim planted it, or Elohim out of the ground made Elohim to grow every tree. Just reminding us what we already know from day 3. It's spoken in past tense and it doesn't specify a day or a time. It just speaks in past. And out of the ground made Yahuwah Elohim. So I want to go ahead and clarify that this is just speaking, reminding us of what has already been done, reminding us of that, and then giving us more detail of this personal relationship that Yahuwah Elohim has with Adam and his creation. Let's go ahead and continue. And out of the ground made Yahuwah Elohim to grow every tree that is pleasant to the sight and good for food, and the tree of life also in the midst of garden, and the tree of knowledge of good and evil. Okay, this is where the plot thickens, right? Okay, but here's something that I also want to point out. So, man is obviously very special to God. We've seen that in chapter 1. It hinted to that because we were given a special blessing or dominion over the previous creation up till that point. You know, God kind of saved the best of his creation for last. He waited till the 6th day to create man. He created everything leading up to the creation of man. He created all of that just for man. And even then created a special place for man's dwelling. What's interesting here is it's pleasant to the sight. This is a place of pleasure. The garden was a place of great pleasure. It was of pleasure for Adam to be in this garden. So this is showing us a little bit about God's will in this creation. God wants us to have pleasures of life, to have pleasures in the creation. Many of the creation was created to be pleasant to us. I also want to point out that this is before the fall. All right, let's go ahead and continue. And good for food. The tree of life also in the midst of the garden, and the tree of knowledge of good and evil. Okay, so why would God create a tree of knowledge of good and evil if we find out later on that he asked us not to eat of it? Well, we also understand right before that God has some pretty powerful redemptive qualities. He can turn chaos into order. He can turn darkness into light. He can turn nothingness like dust into something precious like life. So not only that, but we are getting a little bit of an idea of God's will for his creation of man and the relationship he wants us to have with him. He doesn't want this to be a forced relationship. He didn't create everything to be perfect and then make man perfect and then they have no choice but to be perfect. No, we were given free will to choose to listen to God. And he gave us one simple instruction. Just do not eat of the tree of knowledge and good and evil. So we see that God not only loves us and sees that we are valuable and we are precious to him, but wants us to choose to obey and live with God. It's our choice. We're not forced to. If we chose to turn away from God, that is our choice to do so. He is not forcing our hand. He's not forcing our marriage. He's not forcing our love. That's true love. That is true love. That's freedom. All right, so let's go ahead. Let's continue. And a river went out of Eden to water the garden. Now, here's something that's interesting. Eden must be pretty special. Adam must be man must be pretty special because God created a garden just for Adam, for one. Like of all the earth, he created a special place just for Adam. Not only that, but a river comes out of Eden, which was set eastward. Okay. And water symbolizes spirit. So a river comes out of Eden to water the garden, and thence it was parted. So I'm almost wondering, is this symbolically letting us know that perhaps this place in Eden was a very special place on earth? Was this very close to the heavens? Was the presence of God very prominent or potent in this area? Was this like a place where the heavens and the earth met and where spirit ran out through the waters to water the rest of the world? Because we understand right now, this is all one body of land. There's no continents, there's no divided nations. It's just one body of land. And from the garden comes water. So even the spirit that comes out of Eden is specially made to nourish and water the rest of the creation on land. All right. And a river went out of Eden to water the garden, and from thence it was parted. It became into 4 heads. Now, this is interesting because we're seeing something that I think is significant. Water oftentimes symbolizes spirit. The water was one river, so one source, and then parted into 4. Later on in the Bible, we learn about the 4 angels, the 4 archangels, the 4 winds, the 4 breaths. So I wonder, is this our first little glimpse into that, where one splits into 4? Also giving us a bit of an understanding of how God works too. And we saw that in chapter 1, where Elohim said, let us make man in our image. And then in the next verse, so Elohim created man in his own image. Plural, but singular. Okay, so there's a unity here. There's a unity in the creation. All is a part of God. And there's extensions of the creation that serve more purposes. All right. Became into 4 heads. The name of the first is Pishon. That is it which compasses the whole land of Kavala, where there is gold. And the gold of that land is good. There's bdellium and the onyx stone. So hold on. First of all, we understand that man is very precious to God. So precious that he can form something invaluable out of nothing, and then even places this precious creation of his in a very special location. Not just anywhere on earth, but in a garden made specifically for him. And this garden is made on very valuable land, filled with precious metals and golds and jewels. So obviously, we're pretty important to God. Because he could have put us in a desert. He could have put us in a field. He could have put us in a plateau, on a mountain, on a tree. No, he put us in a garden, a beautiful garden, one that was pleasurable, pleasant, and was built, surrounded, like it nourished itself by its own waters and was built on top of something of great value. But here we are standing on top of it. We're more valuable than even the gold, of the jewels, of the stone. Okay. And the name of the second river is Gishon. The same is it that compasses the whole land of Cush. And the name of the third river is Kiddekel. That is it which goes toward the east of Ashur. And the fourth river is Parath. All right, so there we have, this is a literal physical place. We have a little bit of a geographic, telling of where this place is. This is also before the flood, before the fall. So, earth looked a little different at this time. Verse 15, and Yahuwah Elohim took the man and put him into the garden of Eden to dress it and to guard it. Now, this is interesting, to dress it and to guard it. to protect it, to love it, to nurture it, not to work tirelessly day and night, not to be a slave, but to dress it and to guard it. That's very significant in telling of God's will for us, for man. But let's go ahead and continue. And Yahuwah Elohim commanded the man, saying, of every tree of the garden you may freely eat, but of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil you shall not eat of it, for in the day that you eat thereof you shall surely die. Okay, so we also get an establishment of God's will right here, and we will see this play out throughout the Bible. We have a choice to listen to God's commandment, and we have a choice not to. And we are free to make that choice. If we listen to God's commandments and we do as God commands us, we have everlasting life. Our life, we are provided for. Our life is pleasant. We are in the presence of God. We don't have to worry about death. All we have to do is listen. All we have to do is obey the commandments, and we got it made. We got it very well made. It's not until we part away from the word of God that then we experience death. So as long as we live within the commandments of God, we can have everlasting life. That is good. Okay, let's continue. And Yahuwah Elohim said, it is not good that the man should be alone. I will make him a helper meet for him. Now this is interesting. So all the way up till now, throughout all of chapter 1 and up till now in chapter 2, every time Elohim created something, he said it was good. And I created this and it was good. And I created this and it was good. Here is the first time it is not good. Wow. Okay. Why? Also, something that's interesting is, why would Elohim create Adam first? Why would Elohim allow Adam to experience existence without a wife? All right. I will make him a helper meet for him. Now, one thing I want to just go ahead and eliminate and clear, and I have a couple more points to point this out as we get further in this chapter, is unfortunately, this part of Genesis has been used to indoctrinate misogynistic values. I do not agree with them. And one point I would like to point out, it says, I will make him a helper meet for him. God is going to make a helper meet for Adam. Adam's not making Eve. God is making Eve. Let's point that out. And we understand that Adam and Eve are man, and they were created in his own image. And he created him, male and female created he, them, and he blessed them. All right? So there's equality there. Something else is this part right here, a helper meet. Unfortunately, people have thought that meant the purpose of Eve, or the purpose of the woman or the wife, is to be subservient. And that is not true. And I will point out one thing. Many times throughout the Bible, you will see Yahuwah Elohim described as man's help meet. You will see plenty of times throughout the Bible, Elohim is the helper meet for man. Now, if the helper meet for Adam is Eve, and that is somehow less than or subservient to man, then do you mean to tell me some blasphemy? That Elohim is subservient and less than man? No, I don't think so. I think that is a big error in a common interpretation. But you are more than welcome to have your own thoughts. And if you would like, you can describe them in a respectful way in the comments, and we'll have some feedback and we'll talk about it. But I do believe here it is talking about a helper meet, as in an equal, something to help, right? Not to serve. God isn't below us, so neither is Eve. All right, I've got some more points to back that up, but let's go ahead and continue. And out of the ground, Yahuwah Elohim formed every beast of the field. And here we go again. It's the same deal up here. If you were to just do a crash course, first glance run on this, it would look like chapter 2 is once again contradicting what we read in chapter 1. However, we know we're talking about day 6 because we know we are talking about the formation of Adam and about to talk about the formation of Eve. We know that happened in the 6th day. This does not say, and in that day. It just says, and out of the ground, Yahuwah Elohim, reminding us, oh, by the way, this happened. We know when this happened. It happened in the 5th day, I believe. Yes, the 5th day. I just want to make sure I'm saying that right. Yes. Okay. All right. And Yahuwah Elohim caused, I went too far. And out of the ground, Yahuwah Elohim formed every beast of the field and every fowl of the air and brought them to the man to see what he would call them. And whatsoever the man called every living creature, which was the name thereof. Now, there's a few things that are I would like to point out about this. One, Adam is obviously intelligent. Adam is obviously very intelligent and can think for himself. Adam is also clearly very close to God. For Adam to be able to look at a creation of God and discern what to name it and what to call it, that shows a very strong connection with the intelligence of God himself. Another thing I want to point out is, and it's kind of humorous. So Elohim created Adam first and even stated, it is not good that the man should be alone. So he understands that, but he doesn't bring Adam Eve first. Instead, he brings him every creature he has created. Now, if we remember from chapter 1, we already understand that the creatures, the fowl, the beasts, they have already been blessed by Elohim, saying, be fruitful and multiply. Now, I don't know if you took a biology class at any point in time in your life, but we understand how mammals are able to multiply. Okay, so that would let us know that while Adam is sitting there in the Garden of Eden and he is alone, he has no helpmeet. Elohim has already stated it's not good that you don't have a helpmeet. And he's bringing him all these animals, and Adam is naming them. So he's like, okay, that's a giraffe, that's an elephant, that's a cow, that's a, whatever. He's going through, he's naming them. Adam is seeing that each of God's creation has a helpmeet. There is a male and female of each of the creatures that is coming to the garden and being named by Adam. So it's also kind of given us an idea of God's will. God will show us what we need beforehand. And God will also allow the absence of something to be illuminating. So as of right now, Adam has no Eve. And he's sitting there and he's looking at all these animals, he's naming them, and he's seeing that they have counterparts. All right. Let's go ahead and continue. And the man gives names to all cattle and to the fowl of the air and to every beast of the field. But for the man, there was no found a helpmeet for him. So Adam is sitting there naming all these animals, and this is done. And now he can clearly see there's an absence of something. Adam is missing something in his life. What is he missing? He's missing a bride. Okay, let's move on to verse 21. And Yahuwah Elohim caused a deep sleep to fall upon the man, and he slept. And he took one of his ribs and closed up the flesh instead thereof. All right. Something I would like to point out, again, to reiterate that man and woman are not subservient or higher or above. They are created equal in the image of God. One, I pointed out the helper meet term. We see God oftentimes referred to as the helper meet to man. So that would let us know that obviously that is not meant in a subservient way, because that would be blasphemy to apply that further throughout the Bible. But also, Adam has nothing to do with the creation of Eve. He doesn't. Adam's asleep. He has no part in this. This is not Adam's will. Adam didn't tell God, make me a wife. Elohim put him to sleep. So he has nothing to do with this process. Not only that, but I don't know if you know this about science. Like I said, I don't know if you've looked into biology and stuff, but you may understand that like every cell in our body has the genetic information to be any cell in our body. Like, for example, your liver has the exact same genetic information to be a heart, but yet it knows to be a liver. Now, that being said, Elohim could have taken any part of Adam to make Eve. He could have taken a piece of his hair. He could have taken a finger. He could have taken out of his foot. Could have taken it out of his head. But no, he took it out of the side of Adam, and took it from his rib. This is really starting to show us a little bit of our relationship with each other and with our Creator. Okay, so if Yahuwah Elohim created Eve from his side, that would show that they are equal. They are to stand beside each other. Now, if Elohim had created Eve from Adam's foot, I'd be like, okay, all right, old men with your old ways, sure. Man's supposed to be a dominant over women because God clearly created Eve out of his foot, so we're supposed to stand on top of and trample. But no, God created it out of the rib, from the side, close to the heart. We are supposed to stand beside our woman and love them. We are equal. We are counterparts. Okay. Let's go ahead and continue. And the rib which Yahuwah Elohim had before we get there, and he took one of his ribs and closed up the flesh instead thereof. Now, something I want to point out here is right now we are getting the personal account of Adam's first wife, of man's first wife, Eve. Now, how did Adam get Eve's first wife? Well, the flesh was closed up, so a wound had occurred in his side. So from a wound of the side, Adam got his first wife. Okay, that's interesting because I remember another individual. This is first son getting his first wife. Then later on, we have the story of the second son, Yeshua, and then he gets his second wife. And how does he get his second wife? Well, he takes a wound to the side while being crucified on the cross. So we are seeing a template. I've noticed since I've studied Genesis is there are patterns, and they are perfect and they are complete. And again, I want to remind of something I pointed out in the first episode. It's almost like as if the creation carries the blueprint of the creation itself within it. Okay. So let's go ahead and continue. And the rib which Yahuwah Elohim had taken from man made he a woman and brought her to the man. Again, God made Eve and brought Eve to Adam. Adam was asleep when this happened. Adam had no thoughts. Adam wasn't sitting there co-creating with God saying, yeah, make me, I want it to look like this, and I want it to act like this, and I want it to be like, no. It was made in God's image, not man's image. That's very clear. All right, verse 23. And the man said, this is now bone of my bones and flesh of my flesh. She shall be called woman because she was taken out of man. Wow. Therefore shall a man leave his father and his mother and shall cleave to his woman, and they shall be one flesh. And they were both naked, the man and his woman, and were not ashamed. All right. So the first man has now gotten his first wife. And it is so beautiful. We see that they are bone of my bone and flesh of my flesh. And just as, Adam were created from God, God breathed his breath into something of no valuable and made it precious. Made it so valuable that he even created a beautiful place just for man. We're seeing a pattern of God's will with his creation. He wants us to love, to come together. Unity. Unity with God, unity with each other, and to love. All right. Another thing I wanted to point out is we have this pattern of there shall a man leave his father and his mother and shall cleave to his woman, and they shall be one flesh. That's a pattern we will see throughout the Bible. And we see that many times of, leaving our old self or leaving our desires of flesh or coming into the second son with the second bride. That's one of spirit, one of salvation. We have to depart our ways. We have to depart our earthly mother and father and go to our heavenly mother and father through the bride. All right. Another thing I want to point out, and they were both naked. The man and his woman were not ashamed. So this is before the fall. Before the fall, they were created equal. They were created whole. They were placed in a precious, valuable place made just for them. They weren't tasked with a bunch of chores and labor. They were just asked, keep it safe, protect it, and love it, dress it. Wow. And not only that, right after this, their first task is in that seventh day to just rest in God. Naked, whole, as themselves, no guilt, no shame. They were just able to be all that they are, the way God created them, and they were able to sustain themselves in everlasting life as long as they listened to the commandments of God. Now, of course, this will change as we get to the next episode and we break down chapter 3 and so on. Wow. All right. I'm going to go ahead and leave this one here. Thank you all so much for joining me on our second episode to this Bible study journey. I just want to point out that I'm very grateful for all of you being here and participating. I will try to keep these episodes coming out a little more consistently, about a week apart. However, a lot of time and energy goes into these. So I want to make sure what I produce is completed. So if there's a little bit of a delay, no, I have not abandoned this work. I have not abandoned this channel. It's probably just coming within a week or so. So thank you all so much. If you like what we are doing here, if you want to learn more about the Word of God and you want to join this community, please feel free to like, share, comment, subscribe. I greatly appreciate each and every single one of you that have joined us here today, and I look forward to seeing you on the next episode.